Kia ora and hello, friends. Welcome back to the Restoring Connections podcast. This is Matthew Dawson here with you as per normal, and we are diving back into topics around the healing and strengthening of your most important relationships. Not all relationships are equal in value. All people are equal in value, of course, but not all relationships are. Some of your relationships really wouldn't be that big of a deal if you didn't see them ever again, or saw them less next year than you did this year, or were less connected going forward than you are now. Other relationships are the kind of relationships where that is a very big deal. These are the kind of connections that you want to last throughout the course of your whole life, the kind of relationships that you want to just keep getting deeper and deeper as you go through the challenges and trials of life that will inevitably come. So we are exploring here yet again, how do we build that kind of strength and resilience into these important relationships so that when the storms of life come, when challenges come, when things that just absolutely suck happen, it doesn't break us apart, but it actually but we are empowered to go deeper in our connection with people, that we're empowered to grow, and that we've got that resilience built into the connection that can get us through those tough times. So in this particular episode, we are talking about the question, we're wrestling with the question, what am I learning through this, and what are you learning through this, right? It might have been a simpler title for me to just say, what are we learning through this? But as you'll see when I start to unpack this, that's one of the points that I'm trying to make, is that we don't necessarily always have to be learning the same thing. We're two different people. What I'm learning through something that's really tough and what you're learning through something that's tough might be very, very different, right? Or at least a little bit different. So that's why I framed it that way. What am I learning through this, and what are you learning through this? Now, let me remind you, if you don't know much about me, I am a super, super positive kind of a person. So it's somewhat laughable or maybe miraculous that I would ever even get to a point where I could talk on this topic, but it's actually become something that's incredibly precious to me. I found in life, often it's the things that don't come naturally to you. It's the things that you had to learn the hard way that often become the most important to you, the most precious. And this is definitely one of those ones for me, because going back historically, I hate talking about hard stuff. When we go through something, and I go through something with a team, or with my family, with Cora, that is not awesome, I'm usually looking for the silver lining. I'm usually looking for good vibes. That's what's important to me. So I don't want to be reveling in the all of what we could have done better, and how this sucked and that sucked and blah, blah, blah. I'm not into that kind of thing at all. I want to look for what there is to celebrate, what there, the good that's there. And look, that's never going to change. That me being that way is never going to change. I hope it never changes. And I'm pretty sure the people who I'm closest to, they don't want that to change either. I know Cora doesn't. It's a great quality, to be wired for, looking for what we can be grateful for in the midst of anything, right? So that's not going to change. Having said that, there's also very much been a need in my life to be willing to actually look at what wasn't awesome, because not everything was awesome. Some things did suck. Some things I don't want to experience again. Some things I don't want the people I love to experience again. Some things have damaged trust between me and somebody that I care about. And if I'm passive about that, that's not cool. That is, I'm giving room for a weed to grow in that space. And that weed is going to take every single bit of room that I let it. And it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And then bam, we're going to go through something difficult in life. And I've got to flip in this crack, in the foundation, in my connection with this person. that all of a sudden really shows up and is a big deal. So I don't want to let that happen. So I've learned to be very proactive about actually making sure that we take the time to reflect on what we've learned. And I'm so glad, Cora is the opposite. She's really, grown in her ability to maintain hope and gratitude even in the midst of really painful situations. And I think I've been able to help her with that a little bit. But man, the humility and determination to make sure we learn from the situation, she's absolutely stellar. That's just built into her, and I'm so incredibly grateful for that. We've learned a lot. It hasn't always been comfortable, but we've learned a lot of the blessing and the fruitfulness and the good stuff going on in our lives right now. A lot of that is due to her being the kind of person that isn't afraid to look at, hey, what could we have done differently? What are we learning from this situation, right? So we've just come back from an 8-week trip in different parts of the world, and with the family, with our 3 younger kids. It was super intense. It was wonderful. We spent most of that time in France. We're working with a team of incredible people over there to pioneer a branch of Restoring Connections over there in France, and which involves the actual building of a physical ministry hub, as well as all of the legal framework, getting the nonprofit up and running, getting the financial modeling all up and running. It's a lot of work, and it was a very intense 5 weeks. So wonderful, super intense, super exhausting, and some things that happened were really tough and probably could have been a lot better if we'd approached it differently, right? And so we rented this little car because we've got a car over there, but this team of amazing people came from New Zealand to help us with the building project. And so we gave them our car to use for the 2.5 weeks that they were there. And so we needed to rent ourselves a little car, and to save a bunch of money, we did this like Airbnb style car rental thing, where it's not like a proper car rental company, but you sort of jump on this website and this random bloke is renting his little runabout for, probably about a half of what it would cost to rent a car. So I'm going, perfect. And this thing would squeal like crazy. The brakes were terrible. The windows would squeal. It had no air conditioning. I could just go on and on. This thing was an absolute lemon, but it was really cheap. It got us from point A to point B. So on the last day, we're in France. We're exhausted. It's been really tough, really hard work. And I'm going, yeah, it was really helpful, actually. It was really helpful, the squealing brakes, because I could always tell when you had arrived, and that was quite convenient. And Cora is just looking at me going, babe, please, can we for once, and she didn't say this, but I could just tell, she's like, please, can we for once not look for the silver lining in this? Can we just call it what it was? Like, that sucked. We shouldn't have rented that car. We should have just spent the money and got a decent car. And so there you go. That's like a little insight into, and I'm laughing, I was laughing in the moment, and I'm laughing at myself. I'm like, I know, it's crazy. I've got this relentless thing about finding the silver lining, but sometimes it's over the top. And so I've really I'm trying to paint a picture that this is something that I've had to learn. Now, it sounds really, really simple, right? You go through something difficult, you go through something that's not ideal, and so you debrief it, you get together with the people involved, whether that's with your team or with your life partner or your kids or whatever, and you talk about what could have been done differently and how it could have been better, and then you learn and grow, and sweet as. Why is it not that simple? What are the obstacles? In my experience, the biggest obstacle to that is fear, the fear of being judged, the fear of being criticized, right? In the busyness of everything going on, it's like, do I really want to subject myself to a conversation with my wife or with my husband or with this team? and I'm going to get blamed and criticized for everything. It's going to be really negative, and I'm not up for that. And so we just go through the same dumb things over and over and over and make the same mistakes. We think, oh, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know whether that's true. We say time heals. Does it really? Sure, that can be helpful. But in my experience, if you want to learn something, you've got to actually be willing to look at what took place and really take a good hard look at what you could have done differently and own your responsibility in what happened. It doesn't just happen by accident. I've certainly observed that in my own life, and I'm sure you've at least observed that in other people's lives. It's always a lot easier to see other people's issues than to see your own, right? And so you'll definitely have experienced watching somebody make the same stupid mistake over and over and over, and you're just going, how is that even possible? And you may very well be doing the same thing. You just don't see it as clearly because, it's kind of your own reality. So I think this has to be done proactively. Now, I want to say to team leaders out there, my encouragement to you is to take responsibility for this. Take responsibility for creating an environment where it is safe to do this, where truth can be exchanged. Because we know that just because we're just going to get together and just talk this through, right? No ground rules, no nothing. What's going to happen as a team? Probably the most outspoken members of the team are probably just going to completely run the show, right? And people are going to get hurt. It's like throwing a bunch of people onto a rugby field and just saying, everybody just like go for it and let's see what happens. Man, people are going to get hurt. Stuff like that's not going to be productive. You've got to have some ground rules. You've got to have some clarity about some principles. And same goes, for Cora and I. I don't want to just jump into a random conversation like, hey, let's start. Like, that was hard, especially if our relationship has been through something challenging and maybe the connection between us is a little fragile. I need this conversation to go well. I need this to be a win. And I need to know that we've got some guiding principles. I don't want, I take my mental and emotional health quite seriously. I don't want to be blamed and criticized for everything that took place, right? I'm not up for that. I need some reassurance that we're going to have a safe environment. And so as a husband, I think a wife or a husband can initiate these kind of things. But what I see a lot of, just an observation, this isn't an absolute by any means, but just an observation, what I see a lot of women wanting connection, wanting growth, wanting communication, wanting to be able to understand what happened, what could we have done differently moving forward, and a bit exasperated trying to figure that out. And I see a lot of men going into passivity, right? It's like, yeah, right, awesome. Let's talk for 2 hours about whatever everything I did wrong, right? And so the more aggressive and exasperated she gets, the more passive he gets, and on and on. And the more passive he gets, the more exasperated she is, and the situation goes on and on. My exhortation I'm just saying this, I'm not saying that the roles have to be like this by any means. If you're a woman listening to this, you receive this exhortation too. But as a bloke, I want to really say to the guys out there who might be listening to this, bro, come on, man up and initiate conversation for you to be able to learn together what could have happened differently, and think about what does that conversation look like in a way for you that's healthy and productive, and communicate that. It's as simple as this. Hey, I'd like to have a conversation. I just did this yesterday with Cora and I. We've got our meeting. She's in Christchurch this week, doing a training down there. I was taking her to the airport. We had 2 or 3 hours beforehand. I'm saying, hey, babe, we just got back from this big trip. What's today? Wednesday. We just got back on last Friday. And so we've only been back for a few days. And I'm thinking, while things are fresh, some aspects of that trip were really tough. And I want to make sure that we're learning, that we're growing. Even some, we didn't have a whole lot of connection between us. We didn't communicate a whole lot during that time. I mean, we did well, we hung in there, but I want to make sure that we debrief this thing in a healthy way. And so I'm saying, hey, babe, I'd love to be able to talk about, what we experienced over this 8-week trip, and especially the 5 weeks in France. And I'd like to be able to do that in a really healthy and proactive way. And by this stage of our marriage, we know how this runs. We've got a lot of trust in the tank. We know we both, for the most part, feel pretty safe. But when the connection is a little fragile, sometimes I might need to, reestablish. No, I don't want to be blamed and criticized for everything. I don't want to feel that way. And she's going to go, I don't want you to feel that way either. What could I do to make sure that you don't feel that way? And so we're unpacking that, but we're creating that clarity at the front end. So I really encourage guys out there to be thinking about what would that look like for me to initiate a conversation where we're learning, we're growing, and be clear about what you need from your partner in that conversation in order for you to feel good. Because in a healthy relationship, you matter and I matter, right? That's how it works. It goes both ways. We're not trying to figure out who matters, you matter or I matter. No, that's not healthy. Not either way, that's not healthy. You matter and I don't matter. That's not healthy. I matter and you don't matter. That's not healthy. You matter and I matter. And so we've got to be able to agree together on how to make sure both of our needs are met, right? And as we talk about this kind of stuff, how do we create a safe place? So here's my suggestion. There's 3 guiding principles that I want to unpack here that essentially help Cora and I, and with our team, with other individuals, with our kids, with each other. These are 3 things that we have embraced that really helps these kind of conversations around what are we learning to go really well. And essentially it makes sure that you've got hope pumping in that relationship. You got to have hope for a relationship to really go well, because pain is going to come. Painful situations are going to come. Disappointments are going to come. And if you don't learn and grow, right, then what happens is each layer of disappointment, it just eats away at your hope. It just eats away at it layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. And then you wake up one day and you go, what are we even doing here? Why am I even with you? I didn't even want to be in this relationship. I don't even want you in my life. Get away from me, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. How do we avoid that? Well, when we go through painful things, we're learning, we're growing, right? And that matches that disappointment with the restoration of hope, right? So we're coming back from, a really challenging 5 weeks. There's some trauma there. There's some damage there. I use that word trauma. It's, that can mean lots of different things, but anything less, and for me, anything less than the Garden of Eden, right? I'm a big fan of the Bible, and I love, the Hebrew story of creation, and you can see there the intention of the Creator is the Garden of Eden. That's what the Creator has in mind for humanity, right? And so it's sex and gardening and unicorn rides and laughter and joy and nudity, and it's just, there's no fear, there's children. I could go on and on. That's what we have in mind. So I basically think of anything that's less than that is trauma. It's not Creator's intention. It's not Heavenly Father's intention for us, and so that needs healing then, right? So coming into a conversation like that, 3 guiding principles that we find really helpful to make sure that we feel really good in that space, and that we, because you're going to need to feel good for the conversation to go well. Number 1, you haven't experienced the same thing. Sounds really simple, but it's quite profound if you think about it. We've just right? You might have experienced a lot of the same stimuluses, however you want to say that, right? So Cora and I, we've been sleeping in the same bed. We've been having dinner with the same people. We've been, confronting the same situations. We've been relating to the same children, relating to the same people, right? But we are totally different people. We are completely unique from each other. And so how we experience those things is very, very different. So we have not experienced the same thing. So when we're going into a conversation about what we're learning, we have to start with that framework, right? I'm going to go into that conversation with clarity, like 20/20 vision about what I want Cora to learn. Because I can see her situation. I can see, what I want her to learn so that my life goes better, right? But I've got to be really careful with that. I've got to approach that conversation realizing she hasn't experienced the same things as I have. What I found stressful, she might not have found stressful. So what are we going to have to do? We are going to have to listen. First and foremost, we are going to have to listen to each other. I'm going to say, darling, talk to me about what that experience was like for you. What did you find painful? What did you find helpful? What did you find challenging? What did you find healing? What did you find restful? What did you find really, really aggravating? Talk to me about what you've experienced. And I'm not going to try to tell her what she should have felt or she shouldn't have felt. I'm going to listen to her talk to me about what she experienced. And then I'm really hoping that she'll do the same. And she does, which is really wonderful. But I don't have a guarantee about that, right? So she's going to take a turn. And bear in mind, right, for somebody to be listening, somebody else has to be communicating. We've got to show up to that conversation with some clarity. I've got to show up to that conversation with some clarity for myself. What did I experience? How did that impact me? What am I learning? What would I do differently? Right? If we kind of show up looking at each other and one of us is going, I don't know what I experienced. I don't know what I felt. That's going to be it might be exasperating for the other person. How are we supposed to have this conversation? How are we supposed to learn and grow if you don't even know what you've experienced and how it's caused you to feel and what you're learning and growing? So, earlier in Cora and I's marriage, I would show up, and she'd want to talk about things, and I'm like, okay, let's talk. And she's going, well, how do you feel about this? And I'm looking at her going, I don't know, I wouldn't have the faintest idea. And she's going, man, how am I supposed to feel connected to you? And so I've, out of love for her and out of a desire to grow our connection, I've had to learn to do my homework. The way my wife is wired. She wants to see conviction. She wants to hear my convictions about things. She doesn't necessarily need my convictions to match her convictions, but she wants me to show up with a clear sense of this is what I've experienced, this is what I felt, this is what I want going forward. And even if it's not this, even if it doesn't match all of her feelings and desires and convictions, it just washes peace over her to know, thank goodness, my husband knows what he wants. My husband is not confused. My husband knows what he's learning. And she might go, yeah, there's some things in there that, I wish that he wanted because that's what I want, or I wish that he was learning, because that's what I think he needs to learn. But she's very grateful when I show up to that kind of conversation, having done my homework and I've got something to communicate. This is what I'm experiencing. So yesterday morning, early in the morning, I woke up and I know we're going to have this chat in the afternoon. So I'm doing my homework. I'm spending a good hour and a half just reflecting, because there were 3 different situations that we needed to talk about. Something to do with our children, something to do with the trip, and then something to do with the particular project we're running right now. And so I show up to that meeting with my clarity. I've done my homework. I've thought this through. I know what I've experienced, what I'm feeling, what I'm learning, and what I want going forward. And that really helps the conversation go well. So number 1, you haven't experienced the same thing. You're going to have to listen to each other. Number 2, You don't need to agree on what you're learning as a couple. You might, and hey, that's awesome. If you come away from a time of reflection about something, maybe you come to the end of a year and one of you is basically saying, 2023 just sucked. That was awful. I want to get together and talk about what we're learning, what we could do differently. Straight away, I want to say, you haven't necessarily experienced the same year. You've experienced a lot of the same stimulus, but you're two different people. Secondly, you don't necessarily need to agree on what you've learned. What the other person is learning and growing in might be very different than what you're learning and growing in, and that's okay. If you come away feeling like we both are learning and growing in the same thing, and that makes you feel really close and connected, cool, awesome, that's a win. But it doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes you go, oh my gosh, if you're not seeing what I'm seeing, if you're not feeling what I'm feeling, if you don't believe exactly what I believe about what we need to do differently, I'm just out of control and I'm totally exasperated. And I want to tell you, you got to get to the bottom of that, friend. You got to get to the bottom of that. You do not want to be putting that kind of pressure on your partner. Like that basically you are out of control unless they see what you see, feel what you see, what you feel, believe everything that you believe, about what needs to change going forward. You really need to have permission to be two individual people going on an individual journey. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel any pain. You might get to the end of 2023 and it might be painful for you that the other person is not growing in what you want them to grow in. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. It might be painful, but if that throws you out of control, right, and makes you completely exasperated and hopeless in your life, you don't want to be in that kind of situation. You don't want to be basing your ability to have hope and peace and joy and vision. You don't want to be basing that on the behavior of your partner. You want to have that for yourself. For me, I base that kind of stuff on my connection with God first and foremost, and I bring that into my relationship with Cora. I bring peace. I bring joy. I bring clarity, except for when I don't. And when I don't blame her for it. I own that, and I do whatever it takes to make sure that I get myself into a healthy space. Okay, number one, you haven't experienced the same things. Number two, you don't need to agree on what you're both learning, right? And lastly, we'll bring this home with, you have to let go of control in order to gain the possibility of connection. And it goes right along with that second one. You've got to be able to let go. As I said before, you're going to go into that conversation with 20/20 vision, like I did yesterday. I go into that conversation with Cora. I can't turn that off. I got 20/20 vision as to what I want her to learn, what I want her to be growing in. I can't turn that off, but I've got to be really careful with that, and I've got to let go of control. I've got to let go of the established outcome, in my mind, like that is what she has to learn. I've got to let go of that. And I've got to hope that she might ask me, right? And it's an amazing thing, though. That's how it works, is that the safer she feels in my presence, the less criticized, the less controlled, the less judged she feels in my presence, the more likely she is to ask me that question that I so want her to ask, which is, what do you see, babe? What do you think I could have done differently? What do you think I could have, how do you think I could have managed myself, in a different way? Maybe you see something that I don't see. I mean, that is just so awesome when we ask each other those kind of questions. But that is a scary thing to ask, to give someone that kind of permission to speak in. You're going to have to feel real safe, right? And so, the more, and the vice versa, the more safe I feel in her presence, the less criticized I feel, the less controlled I feel, the less judged I feel, the more likely I am to say, babe, you are an incredibly intelligent woman. And you're looking at me, all day long. You're smelling me, seeing me, hearing me all day long. I'm not, all my senses are pointing outwards. I'm looking at you. You're looking at me. You're experiencing me, right? What do you think I could do differently? Have you got some insight for me? And when we have that level of safety in the conversation, man, the gold just comes out. Oh my goodness, the gold, the treasure. Some of the most powerful things, some of the things that I experience in my life, that are just so incredibly enriching and wonderful and beautiful, came off the back of me asking a question like that to Cora and her pointing something out, and I'm going, freaking heck. That is true, actually. That is kind of painful to hear, and I'm a little bit aggravated, but that is actually true. I really do need to work on that. I thought, there's no way I could have avoided that. I'm just trapped. That's what it was. But actually, Cora pointed out, it didn't have to be that way. I actually could have done this instead of that. I could have approached the person like this instead of approaching them like that. I could have called them instead of writing the email. I could have parked my strong emotions about that rather than trying to confront the situation straight away. I could have lent in and been generous. I could have, or the opposite, I could have actually had some boundaries there instead of trying to rescue the situation. And that actually probably would have made things a lot better, right? And vice versa. And so we're wanting to, that's the goal, right? The goal is to create enough safety in the conversation that those exchanges of truth can happen between people, and that goal that it can land on those seeds. I'm trying to think of a metaphor that works. Those seeds of truth can land on a soft heart. But as soon as you got fear and anxiety in there, poof, that sucker's gone. So these are some of these things that are really about how do we reduce anxiety and increase love and create a context where we get to learn and grow and maintain a strong sense of hope in our relationship with each other. There we go. That was what am I learning and what are you learning? I hope that you found it helpful. See you, friends.
We hope you found the conversation and stories on today's podcast helpful and insightful. If you want to go deeper, Restoring Connections offers online courses that cover key topics like personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. Go to www.restoringconnections.nz for more information. This podcast is funded by generous supporters from all over the world. Please consider supporting by going to the Restoring Connections website and hitting the Contribute button. By partnering with us, you're helping to provide mentoring, workshops, and training to others who are also restoring their connections.